The Sudur Havid disaster. Survival in Antarctic waters. On June 6, 1998, in the heart of the Antarctic winter, a fishing trawler named Sudur Havid sailed into one of the most violent storms ever recorded in the Southern Ocean. What followed was a catastrophic disaster that would claim 17 lives and leave the survivors clinging to life in freezing waters so cold they were below the freezing point of freshwater. Among those survivors was Matt Lewis, a 23-year-old British marine biologist who had been hired as the ship's mandatory independent scientific observer. His survival story is one of the most harrowing accounts of fishing vessel disasters in Antarctic history, a tale of corporate negligence, human error, and the razor-thin margin between life and death in Earth's most unforgiving waters. This is the true story of what happened when profit met peril in the killing fields of the Southern Ocean. The Sudur Havid and her crew. The Sudur Havid was an aging South African fishing trawler, a rust-streaked vessel that had seen better days. When Matt Lewis first laid eyes on her in Cape Town, his heart sank. He had been given a choice between two vessels for his position as scientific observer, a requirement for fishing in Antarctic waters, and he had chosen the Sudur Havid because it had English-speaking officers. Now, standing on the dock looking at the small, weathered boat, he realized he had made a terrible mistake. Underwhelming was how he would later describe his first impression. The sister ship he could have chosen, the Northern Pride, was larger and far better maintained. Instead, Lewis had selected what he would come to call the small, older rust bucket. The crew was a diverse mix that reflected South Africa's complex ethnic landscape. The officers were mostly South African Afrikaners, while much of the crew consisted of Ovambo men from Namibia and Xhosa speakers from South Africa. There were also Cape-coloured crew members, a German engineer named Klaus, and nominally, an Icelandic captain who had been hired purely for his safety certificate. The Icelandic captain was largely confined to his cabin and told to come out only for night duty. He wasn't actually commanding the ship. The real authority rested with Bubbles McDonough, the working captain, and Boaty, the fishing master. These two men would make the decisions that determined whether the Sudur Havid sailed into danger or turned back to safety. Unfortunately, their judgment would prove catastrophically flawed. Because many crew members spoke Afrikaans as their first language, English was often a second or third tongue. The crew took to calling Lewis simply Englishman. He would hear it constantly: "Englishman, come over here. Englishman, get out of the way." And when the fishing wasn't going well, "Englishman, you've brought us bad luck, we're not catching any fish." The ship's mission was to hunt for Patagonian toothfish, one of the most valuable catches on Earth. Known to consumers as Chilean sea bass, these fish can live up to 60 years, grow to 2 meters in length, and weigh more than 200 pounds. They are formidable predators with mouths full of razor-sharp, backward-pointing teeth designed to grip prey. Lewis described them as abyssal cruise missiles with toothy grins. The fishing grounds lay near South Georgia Island, deep in the Antarctic Southern Ocean, in waters known ominously as the Furious 50s, the band of latitude between 50 and 60 degrees south where some of the world's most violent weather occurs. Journey to the edge of the world. After departing Cape Town, the Sudur Havid made its way south through increasingly cold and hostile waters. The temperature dropped steadily as they left behind the warmer currents and entered the realm of icebergs, fierce winds, and enormous swells. They were fishing at latitudes equivalent to where Lewis's home in Aberdeen, Scotland, sits in the Northern Hemisphere, but the Southern Ocean is far more treacherous. With no continental landmasses to break up the weather systems, storms race unimpeded around the globe at these latitudes, building massive waves and generating winds that can exceed 100 miles per hour. The Sudur Havid employed longline fishing, a method that involves deploying a main line approximately 15 miles long, baited with 14,000 hooks. Each hook, 3 to 4 inches in length, was baited with a sardine. The line would be set at night, partly to avoid attracting seabirds, and left to soak for hours before being retrieved. As the line came back aboard, crew members would remove the toothfish, which could fetch extraordinary prices on international markets. Lewis's role as scientific observer was to monitor the catch and document the fishing operation to ensure it complied with conservation regulations. One of his responsibilities was tracking seabird mortality, particularly albatrosses, which were being killed in staggering numbers by longline fishing operations around the world. Albatrosses are attracted to the baited hooks. If they grab a sardine as the line is being deployed, the weight pulls them underwater and they drown. Lewis learned that one of his crewmates had previously worked on an illegal fishing vessel in the Southern Ocean and had seen 400 seabirds caught in a single operation. Fortunately, the Sudur Havid was more careful. During their time at sea, they caught only 4 albatrosses and managed to save 2 that were still alive when they were retrieved. The weather during their first weeks at sea was mixed. Some days were calm enough that they could turn off the engine and drift. The fishing was reasonably good, and the routine became almost ordinary as anything can be when you're fishing in some of the most remote and dangerous waters on Earth. But Lewis began to notice problems with the ship. The vessel wasn't properly maintained. Safety equipment was inadequate or missing entirely. There were no survival suits, specialized insulated garments designed to keep a person alive in freezing water. The life rafts were old and questionable. When he and others raised concerns with McDonough and Boaty, they were largely ignored. The ship's owners, Lewis would later learn, had prioritized profit over safety. The Sudur Havid had been sent to sea in conditions it wasn't ready for, with equipment that wasn't adequate, all in pursuit of the lucrative toothfish catch. The storm. On the morning of June 6, 1998, the crew of the Sudur Havid woke to find conditions had deteriorated dramatically overnight. The wind had picked up to gale force, and the seas were building into enormous swells. By 10 a.m., when Lewis ventured out on deck, he witnessed something he would never forget. Waves so high they cast shadows in the morning light. Think about that for a moment. For a wave to cast a shadow at 10 o'clock in the morning, it must be extraordinarily tall. Lewis estimated them at 10 meters or more, roughly 33 feet, equivalent to a 3-story building. These weren't just large waves. They were moving mountains of water, each one capable of capsizing a ship. The wind shrieked through the rigging. Spray flew across the deck in blinding sheets. Standing upright was nearly impossible. Lewis braced his legs against the railings just to avoid being swept overboard. The ship pitched and rolled violently, climbing each wave only to plunge down the other side with a sickening drop that left his stomach in free fall. And yet, incredibly, they were still fishing. This was the decision that would doom the Sudur Havid. Any prudent captain would have pulled in the fishing gear, secured the deck, and either run before the storm or heave to ride it out. But McDonough and Boaty wanted to keep fishing. Every hour of downtime meant lost revenue. They had a quota to fill and a schedule to keep. Klaus, the German engineer, checked the water temperature that morning and reported it to Lewis. -1 degree Celsius. The water was actually below the freezing point of freshwater, kept liquid only by its salt content. If anyone went into that water, they would have minutes, not hours, before hypothermia killed them. The crew struggled to work on the heaving deck. Men were being thrown around, clinging to whatever they could grab. The fishing gear was becoming damaged. Water was coming over the rails with each wave. The pumps were working constantly to clear the deck. Then, in the early afternoon, Lewis received the clearest signal yet that disaster was imminent. Danny, one of the crew members who had befriended Lewis, approached him with an unusual request. Weeks earlier, when they had stopped to refuel, Danny had given Lewis a chilling warning. If we ever have to abandon ship, the crew will fight with knives for a space in the life rafts. At the time, Lewis had been shocked. Surely people would help each other in an emergency. But Danny had been deadly serious, and Lewis had taken note. Now, in the midst of the storm, Danny asked, "Matt, can I borrow one of your knives?" Lewis handed him a large filleting knife. Danny took it, walked over to a chopping board, and stabbed it in deep, leaving it standing upright. "Now it's ready," he said. Lewis felt ice in his veins that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. Danny was preparing for an emergency evacuation. The ship was in mortal danger. Abandoned ship. What happened next occurred with terrifying speed. The Sudur Havid, already struggling in the mountainous seas, took a wave badly. The vessel rolled far over to one side, water cascading across the deck. When she tried to right herself, the crew heard a sound like a gunshot. Something structural had given way. Water began pouring into the hull through damaged seams. The pumps, already working flat out, couldn't keep up with the influx. The ship was going down. The order came to abandon ship. In those waters, 170 miles from land, with water at -1 degree and waves 10 meters high, this was essentially a death sentence. But staying aboard was certain death. The ship was sinking. 3 life rafts were deployed. Lewis found himself in one with 17 men crammed inside, far more than it was designed to hold. In the chaos of abandoning ship, the large steel arch on the fishing vessel's stern broke free and crashed down, tearing into Lewis's life raft and flooding it with seawater. They were now sitting waist-deep in water that was below freezing. The raft was designed to keep people dry and insulated from the cold, but it had been catastrophically compromised. The freezing water was in direct contact with their bodies. Lewis looked around at his crewmates. The canteen steward was wearing flip-flops and a t-shirt. He had come directly from the galley with no time to grab warmer clothes. Many of the Namibian crew members, coming from a hot African climate, had no experience with cold water. Most couldn't swim. They had no survival suits, no immersion suits, nothing to protect them from the killing cold. The men tried frantically to bail out the raft, but waves kept washing over them, refilling it as fast as they could empty it. Eventually, they had no choice but to seal the hatch and simply wait in the flooded raft, sitting in the lethal water. Lewis didn't know if a Mayday distress call had been sent. He didn't know if any other ships were in the area. The nearest vessel he knew of was 100 miles away, too far to reach them in time. As darkness fell and the storm continued to rage, hope began to fade. The cold was indescribable. Lewis had done scuba diving training and knew something about hypothermia. He knew he needed to keep his core temperature up, so he tried to position himself out of the deepest water, sitting on the inflated side of the raft rather than fully submerged. He kept himself busy with small tasks, adjusting the hatch cover, bailing water, tightening his deck suit, anything to keep his muscles moving and generating heat. But around him, men were dying. The aftermath. The survivors were taken to South Georgia Island and then transported back to South Africa. A formal inquiry was launched into the disaster. The investigation revealed a cascade of failures that had turned what should have been a manageable situation into a deadly catastrophe. The ship had been poorly maintained. Safety equipment was inadequate or missing. The crew had not been properly trained for emergency situations. Most critically, Captain McDonough and Fishing Master Boaty had made catastrophic decisions on the day of the storm, choosing to continue fishing rather than secure the ship and ride out the weather. The South African inquiry placed blame squarely on the officers commanding the ship. At first, Lewis had blamed the owner for sending an unseaworthy vessel to sea, which was certainly true. But as he reflected on the disaster, he realized that McDonough and Boaty could have saved the ship and everyone aboard if they had simply listened to the warnings they were receiving and stopped fishing. They would have lost some fish and equipment, but they would have kept the boat and all 38 lives. Instead, they gambled with other people's lives and lost. 17 men died for the sake of a few more hours of fishing. Lewis returned to Britain and tried to move on with his life. For years, he didn't talk about what had happened. Keep calm and carry on was his approach. Pretend nothing had happened, tell no one the story. He changed jobs, moved to different places, but avoided discussing the disaster. It wasn't natural pub conversation, after all. But trauma has a way of insisting on being heard. 6 years after the disaster, Lewis began to write. It took him 2 more years to complete his book, Last Man Off, a true story of disaster and survival on the Antarctic seas. The act of writing forced him to revisit every detail, to relive the nightmare, but it also brought a measure of healing. The ultimate closure came when he became a father. He named his daughter Camila, after the ship that saved his life, the Isla Camila. While still adrift, traumatized and hypothermic, Lewis had met one of the Chilean deckhands who pulled him aboard and promised that if he ever had a daughter, he would name her after the rescue ship. Years later, he was able to fulfill that promise. He even made contact with Captain Sandoval to tell him that his daughter bore the name of the captain's ship. It was a beautiful moment of connection, a link between the worst day of his life and one of the best. The broader context. The Sudur Havid disaster was not an isolated incident. Commercial fishing in Antarctic waters is one of the most dangerous occupations on Earth, combining extreme weather, freezing temperatures, remote locations, and the constant pressure to catch as much as possible as quickly as possible. The Patagonian toothfish fishery has been particularly controversial. The fish's high value, it can sell for $20 or more per pound in restaurants, has attracted both legal and illegal fishing operations. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated (IUU) fishing for toothfish has decimated some populations and killed countless albatrosses and other seabirds. The albatross mortality that Lewis witnessed is part of a larger crisis. 19 of the 21 albatross species are threatened with extinction, largely due to longline fishing. These magnificent seabirds, which can have wingspans exceeding 10 feet and live for over 50 years, are being killed by the tens of thousands each year as bycatch. Conservation efforts have made some progress. Requirements for independent observers like Lewis, mandatory bird scaring lines, streamers that keep birds away from baited hooks, and the prohibition of setting lines during daylight in seabird-rich areas have all helped reduce mortality. But the problem persists, especially in illegal fisheries that ignore these regulations. The Southern Ocean itself, the ring of water that surrounds Antarctica, remains one of Earth's most challenging maritime environments. The combination of extreme cold, powerful winds, enormous waves, and the presence of ice makes navigation treacherous. Modern ships with advanced technology still sink there. Fishing vessels, often operating with minimal margins and aging equipment, are particularly vulnerable. Reflection. Matt Lewis survived the Sudur Havid disaster through a combination of knowledge, equipment, and luck. His scuba diving training taught him about hypothermia. His deck suit, though inadequate, provided just enough insulation. His mental discipline, keeping himself busy with small tasks, fighting the urge to give up, kept him alive when others succumbed. But he never forgets the 17 men who didn't make it. The canteen steward in flip-flops who never had a chance. Danny, who had warned him about the knives and tried to protect him. The Namibian and South African crew members who found themselves in water so cold it defied their understanding. Their deaths were preventable. A seaworthy vessel, proper safety equipment, adequate training, and responsible command decisions would have saved them. They died because profit was prioritized over safety, because warnings were ignored, because those in authority made catastrophically bad choices. Lewis has since dedicated part of his career to marine conservation and sustainable fishing practices. He knows firsthand the terrible price that can be paid when fishing operations cut corners or prioritize short-term gain over long-term sustainability and safety. He still lives in Aberdeen, Scotland, working as a marine biologist. He doesn't fish commercially anymore. Once was enough. When people ask what he does, he tells them about his scientific work. But those who know his story understand that he's also a survivor, someone who looked death in the face in the freezing waters of the Antarctic and somehow lived to tell the tale. The Southern Ocean continues to take lives. Fishing vessels still sink in those waters. Crews still face the impossible combination of extreme weather, freezing temperatures, and the relentless pressure to catch fish profitably. But the disaster of the Sudur Havid stands as a stark reminder of what can go wrong when basic safety principles are ignored. It's a warning about the deadly consequences of putting profit before people. For Matt Lewis, the rescue by the Isla Camila was nothing short of miraculous. Being found so quickly, within 30 minutes of the rescue ship arriving on scene, at night, in an unlit raft during a raging storm, defied all reasonable probability. "I don't think you get any luckier than that," he reflected. His daughter Camila, now old enough to understand her name's significance, carries with her a reminder that even in humanity's darkest moments, when profit-driven negligence sends people to their deaths in freezing water, there are also heroes. Captain Sandoval and the crew of the Isla Camila risked their own lives in terrible conditions to save strangers. They are the reason Matt Lewis is alive today. They are the reason Camila exists. In the end, the story of the Sudur Havid is both a tragedy and a testament. It shows us the worst of human nature: greed, negligence, the willingness to sacrifice lives for profit. But it also shows us the best: courage, determination, the instinct to help those in desperate need. The 17 men who died in those freezing waters are not forgotten. Their story, preserved in Lewis's book and retold here, stands as a memorial to their lives and a warning to future generations. The sea, especially the Antarctic Sea, demands respect. It demands preparation. It demands that we value human life above all else. 17 men learned that lesson too late. The rest of us should learn it from their sacrifice.